I'm a photo media artist currently working in the moving image. My practice explores the relationship between the mundane and the ominous, particularly when looking at Australian landscapes. Growing up, I spent many of my weekends travelling around rural New South Wales with family. I remember how the vastness of the landscape created a sense of austerity that both scared and excited me. I think it's interesting how the Australian landscape has such a sense of mystery and depth to it, especially when you consider Australia's dense history, First Nation spiritual connection to the land, as well as the atrocities that followed colonisation. Society's attitude post-Wolf Creek and other stories depicted through cinema, like Fred Shapissi's A Cry in the Dark and Peter Weir's Picnic at Hanging Rock. I usually begin a project with a clear idea of the outcome. Whether it be aesthetic or conceptual, one usually follows the other. From there, I allow ideas to grow and change. My research mainly consists of watching films, particularly Scandinavian or Australian, where landscape is a crucial element of cinema. My current body of work is heavily inspired by Greek and Roman myth and the idea of eternal damnation. In my work, Aionios, the notion of eternal damnation is explored through the idea of anthropomorphism. The work is specifically inspired by the punishment of Tantalus, who was a figure in ancient Greece who was eternally damned for his sins against Zeus. Tantalus was sentenced to eternity tied to a fruit-bearing tree with low-lying branches. Whenever he became hungry, Tantalus reached out for the fruit only to have its branches moved just out of reach. The tree grew from a pool of water where Tantalus was bound to, and so whenever he went to drink, the water would recede. Instead of depicting human suffering, I've used a floating tree stump that has been caught in the tide. I'm interested in the continuous cycle of the driftwood, either being submerged in the sand at low tide or caught in place when it's high tide. Something very melancholic about the plight of the driftwood. A good tool for me to solve problems would be always filming more work than I need, especially filming scenes or recording audio that I may not think I'll use in my final work at the time, because they're usually the ones that save you in the end. Another very important thing is liaising with my peers. Talking to them about problems I've experienced and encountered in my work is always beneficial because you never know who's going to have the right answer to get you back on track. In the past, I've often shot work that involves the human form and its relationship to the landscape around it. However, for my work in progress, Aionios, I tried to experiment with an inanimate object. In this case, it was the driftwood that I discovered floating in the tide at Botany Bay while dog walking. The next day, I returned to find the driftwood once again caught in the tide, moving and placed almost exactly the same spot as the day before. I returned later that day with my camera and tripod to record its plight, and that's what created my current work. Most of my work is shot while travelling around rural New South Wales. However, all my processing is done from home from my laptop using Premiere Pro and Ableton sound editing software. In 10 years from now, I imagine myself working at an institutional gallery, as well as maintaining a creative practice and continuing to make moving image-based work.